Hi, this is Irv Steele, your host of Local Issues, and we have started a couple years ago to highlight good people doing good work in the community to try and build a stronger, more positive community. And over the last few years, we've had hundreds of guests. Now we're up to thousands of subscribers on YouTube, and most of the shows are now reaching thousands of viewers. So really grateful to have the support of the community and continue to highlight good people. And today we are really excited to have a special guest. He is a human resources consultant who has lived and worked all over the world and has a plethora of experience and wisdom and knowledge to share with us. And wherever we are in our careers and our jobs, human resources will be one aspect that we need to know a little bit more, whether we are the employer or the employee. So welcome, Ken Summers, to the show. How are you?
I'm good, Irving. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Definitely. Sounds great. And one thing that people are always really curious about is how is the economy these days? And it's tough to tell, but you interact with large, small, medium, everything in between companies. What do you see for Eastern Connecticut right now?
Well, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is start at the national level and kind of peel down.
Perfect.
Because I think what happens at the national level inevitably influences locally.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna read from some notes that I prepared for this.
And thanks for the preparation.
No, not smart enough to keep everything in my head.
Yeah.
I wish I was. So overall, the U.S. job market remains pretty strong. There are signs of cooling, but relatively speaking, it's a pretty strong job market. Key sectors that continue to be hot are technology. Even though there's been a number of layoffs in the tech sector, on balance, it's still a strong sector. Healthcare, sadly, people keep getting sick, people getting older. Healthcare is healthy from an employment point of view and will continue to be. Green jobs have emerged in a serious way. And remote work continues to be a popular option that we're seeing nationally. And we could go down a whole rabbit hole on work from home. Maybe it'll come up, maybe it won't. But I have an opinion on that. From a Connecticut point of view or a more regional point of view, broadly, Connecticut's doing We had the weakest job growth in New England last year.
Oh, really?
Yep. We were actually fifth out of 6 states in the region, not the weakest. But we are trailing the nation in terms of the rate of job growth here. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is we have a shrinking workforce. And I have some stats. In fact, maybe this is a good opportunity. So this is from the National Government's Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay.
In July of last year, New London County had about 141,000 people in the workforce. At December of last year, we had 139,000 people in the workforce. So we have a shrinking population, workforce population. We have an aging workforce population. And we have a tough cost of living environment for people. Because the economy in this part of the state has been relatively healthy with the growth of firms like Electric Boat, people are getting crowded out of the housing market, which I imagine you could do a whole episode on the housing market.
Yeah,
here.
we've talked about that numerous times. With the increase of these workers, it does create kind of this tough market for housing.
Yeah, so the workforce is shrinking, but people aren't leaving the area, so there aren't homes available, and there's not a heck of a lot of home construction going on.
Yeah, and one thing that we hear a lot about too is that the jobless claims continue to increase, but then maybe there aren't enough jobs that are being created to fill this demand.
There aren't enough jobs being created to fill the demand, and we could go 7 different directions now.
Yeah.
Employers, for a whole range of reasons, are being very, very particular before they hire, which actually, if we have time, we should get into that a little bit. But it's a turnoff for the employee. It's a problem for the employer. It's a turnoff for your applicants, and you're not filling the roles that you need to fill in order to have productive output.
It's tough. I hear and see different things from people in the tech world or other spaces where they go through maybe 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. They have to perform work samples, and sometimes they're not even accepted after all of that.
And sometimes they're not even responded to after all of that.
Yeah, no response. And what kind of experience is that for them?
I had to catch myself.
Yeah.
It is an unpleasant and unfulfilling experience.
Mm-hmm.
But just to bring it back to the original question, in New London County, so let me be specific. We have some unique characteristics in this part of the state. We've got the defense industry through EB, of course. We have hospitality and tourism is very popular because of our beaches.
Especially in the summertime.
Exactly.
Yep.
Healthcare is a growth sector for this area.
Hartford Healthcare, Yale New Haven Health.
And manufacturing. The manufacturing pipeline initiative from the state has really been good for New London County. We do have a pipeline of talent coming. I think of the young man who lives right across the street from me, who's, I won't name his name, but he's a sophomore at El Grasso studying welding. This young man's going to come out of high school and he'll probably make $80,000 a year at Electric Boat. Where else are you going to make $80,000 a year as a high school graduate?
Exactly. And it's a nice opportunity for a lot of people where maybe traditionally people were told, you have to go to college. If you want to have a career, if you want to have a job, you need a 4-year degree plus more. But now, as you said, there's this pipeline where you can graduate $80,000 a year. Amazing salary for someone to graduate from high school with that.
Yeah, I mean, this happens to be a good kid, on top of everything else. But I'm a firm believer that the world has changed. I think most people will agree with that. And with the advent of AI and a really changing macro economy, having a trade is a pretty good strategy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Huge opportunities, electricians and plumbers and all these different things. And one other area that we see recently is with the stock market. That Drew and I talk about it off the show, that some of these stocks are just booming. We see them, at least for the most part, kind of booming. But does that really connect back to this local economy? What do you think?
Well, I mean, you take a company like NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA's been in the news because they are the granddaddy of AI chips. And it's hard to see the influence of NVIDIA's success in New London County. Maybe in Silicon Valley, but New London County, not so much. We're not exactly a tech hub. So, but no, I think the market has what they call the wealth effect. And if your portfolio is doing well, you're more inclined to spend money, which generally is good for the economy. So I think we see some of that indirectly. Because, knock wood, it's been a good couple of years for the market, recent weeks notwithstanding. So, I think we see more consumer spending, which is good for the economy. But in terms of job growth as a consequence, I don't see it in this part of the state, actually.
Okay.
So.
And maybe we could take a step back, kind of as you were saying, that you have a phenomenal amount of experience in human resources. You've worked in multiple different countries. Maybe you could share a little bit about kind of your background and your passion for human resources and maybe some of your international assignments.
Sure. I'll try to make it short and sweet so I don't
take
bore
your time.
people.
It's interesting to learn.
So I'm going to go back to undergraduate days, and I'm a graduate of the university, a proud graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
It's a great school.
It is a great school. And it's a great school despite its moniker as ZooMass. But as an undergraduate, I was an English major. And I think it helped me to be a critical thinker and to be able to express myself both orally and on a piece of paper. But you don't get a lot of job offers as an English major. So I had the good fortune of a faculty person kicking me in the behind and saying, "What are you going to do with your life, kid?" And he helped me gain admission to the MBA program.
Nice.
So I enrolled in that program and spent semesters studying finance and accounting, which I didn't have as an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took my first human resources class, which at the time was called personnel, and just fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished my master's degree and was lucky enough to be hired by IBM right out of university.
Mm-hmm.
Spent the next 19 years and 8 months working for IBM, culminating as the head of HR for what was IBM's outsourcing division in Asia.
Wow.
So spent the last 3 years of my IBM time in Singapore.
Mm-hmm. That's a hot spot to be.
Yeah, yeah. And I call Singapore Asia for beginners.
Yeah.
Because it's quite friendly to Western people.
Very clean.
Ultra modern.
Isn't it something like if you spit gum out, you can go to jail for that in Singapore?
Well, the joke is Singapore is known as a fine country. There are lots of fines for bad behavior.
Okay.
Spitting your gum on the street is finable, but I don't think it's imprisonable.
Okay.
At least not yet.
So
now, I haven't
3 years
been
in
there for a
Singapore.
while.
Yeah.
From Singapore, I left IBM and took a job in Hong Kong and did some HR consulting in the Greater China region for a couple of years. From there, we moved to Japan, spent 8 years in Japan with an insurance company and the Hartford Insurance Company, actually. And then with Morgan Stanley, the investment bank.
Okay.
From there, repatriated back to the U.S. for a while. And then
Was that hard?
It was really hard because we had been overseas for 14 consecutive years.
14 years.
But it was a wonderful experience, both professionally and personally. My son graduated high school in Hong Kong.
Incredible.
My daughter graduated high school in Japan.
Wow.
Experiences that they just wouldn't have had.
Learning languages and cultures and everything.
Plus the poor kids. The international schools in that part of the world, their spring break typically involved a culturally enriching experience for them. So we came back and readjusted to being in America, and the phone rang one day, and literally 6 weeks later, I was in India for a year.
India. Incredible India.
Incredible India, indeed.
Yeah.
And I have to say, India was probably one of the most profound experiences.
How so?
Well, it not only the people who are just lovely.
Yeah.
I can't come up with a better word than that. But I wouldn't call it a religious experience, but it was a spiritual experience. And my spirituality evolved as a consequence of the time in India and the exposure to the culture. So
and lots of chai tea, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, yes.
It's so delicious.
Yeah. So from India, then I went to Malaysia with the same firm, came back to the States again, and early of 2020, I had to get my dates right.
Yeah.
That firm sent me to Poland to be the interim country manager while we were waiting for a new hire to join us. You may recall that in March of 2020, we had this little thing called COVID.
Oh, jeez.
So my wife was with me in Poland, and we saw what was happening and said, I think we better get out. And we literally were able to get out of Poland 24 hours before they closed the border.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm not exaggerating. Came back to the States and looked around and said, you know what? 40x years of corporate life is enough. And I quit. And I hung out a shingle, and here I am today.
Yeah. Easier said than done, though, that it's easier maybe to go find a job, have dependable monthly income, all of that. It takes a lot of courage to go out there and say, hey, I have this knowledge and wisdom. I can go help people and make a living doing that.
Well, I was fortunate. We prepared for that phase of life. So hanging out a shingle became something that I wanted to do as opposed to something that I had to do. And from time to time, I thought about going back to the corporate sector.
Yep.
And I said, no, I like being my own boss.
You like it.
And quite honestly, I like working with customers, clients that I want to work with.
Yeah, you get to choose.
You get to choose, and when you're in a corporate environment,
Not
you
a
don't
lot
get
of
to
choice.
choose.
Yeah,
And not everybody is fun to work with.
yeah. I'm curious, going from India to Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Poland, you've seen a lot of different ways to do things. I'm curious kind of how that compares to your experiences here in the States of how things function, maybe specific to human resources, if
Yeah.
you could.
Yeah, by all means. So probably the most profound difference is in America we have a concept, excuse me, that we call employment at will.
Okay.
And the way employment at will works is that I can be terminated pretty much at any time
For any reason.
for any reasonable situation. Pardon me. Much of the rest of the world has much better employee protection. Japan is probably the extreme example where it's exceedingly difficult to terminate someone in Japan. I've done it. Oh, by the way, it's very unpleasant to do it in Japan, but it's doable.
Okay.
But you really have to have compelling reasons why you're doing it. So the difference, that employment at will concept is probably the most significant difference because it ripples through all your other people practices. Another example would be we train in America, but we train in America the same way we teach kids in school. We prepare people to pass a test
Okay.
or to get through a particular event. Whereas my experience in other places has been, if you're going to invest in your employees, you do it for the long term, not to do to get through a particular event or a particular activity. So, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush because there are always exceptions, and there are many, 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 many outstanding employers in America. But I think we find in Europe, certainly in Asia, most of Asia, employers take a longer view as opposed to a more transactional employment relationship.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And it maybe kind of dovetails perfectly into some of our interests from some of our viewers talking about employment at will. And sure that kind of you said anything reasonable you can be let go because of that. However, it doesn't include discrimination.
No.
And so maybe you want to share a little bit kind of how that functions in the whole human resources element if our viewers are facing discrimination at the workplace or different things happening. Unfortunately, it's something that we kind of have to talk about when it comes to human resources.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one other quick point on employment at will. There is the employee side to employment at will. Although you can be terminated for pretty much any reason, you can also quit for any reason. So we're not bound to an employer. So that's the trade-off in employment for will.
The trade-off, and then I guess out of sign of respect, usually the customary thing, you know better than me, is maybe
Typically
2 weeks or
yeah.
maybe a month, and that compares quite drastically from places in Europe, like Czech Republic. I think the minimum is 3 months, so
Yes, yeah.
it's
So,
very different.
Yeah, the fellow who is going to be the permanent head of the country in Poland had to give a 3-month notice.
There you go.
Which is why a guy like me had to go over there.
Yeah.
So your point is well taken. But back to discrimination.
Yeah.
So discrimination in the workplace is still there.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I mean, let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
It takes all kinds of forms. The most common or the most talked about, would be sexual harassment. And the good news is we used to see a lot of what is called quid pro quo, this for that, where one of the ways it would manifest is, I will give you a raise or I will give you a promotion if you have an affair with me. That's largely disappeared. It's not gone, but we do see a lot more environmental harassment.
Okay, What does that mean?
So it can take many forms. It can be an off-color jokes, sexual innuendo, and what we look for is a pattern of that bad behavior. And when you can establish a pattern of bad behavior, you have grounds for action.
Okay.
That's not to say a one-off incident can't also get you in trouble.
Yeah.
It's about context, severity, frequency, etc. But no, it very much exists. And I know one of the things you want to talk about is what does someone do?
Yeah, what would an employee do in this situation?
So I would hope that you as an employee would have a good relationship, a trusting relationship with your direct supervisor, and could go to him or her
And talk to them about
it. Not everybody has that. And that's where your HR person should come in.
Okay. And this is something that they can trust the HR person to share the information.
Let me put it like this. If the HR person can't be trusted to take that information, evaluate it objectively, and take appropriate action that is balanced between the business's needs and the employee's situation, then he or she shouldn't be in HR.
Yeah, pretty clear.
That's what I look for. And when I work with younger practitioners in the field, one of the lessons I try to impart really early on is HR, people don't go into HR, let me rephrase that, people should not go into HR because they're people pleasers. People should go into HR if they want to leverage the value of human capability to deliver organizational success. The flip side of that is that the business has to cultivate its population so that it can achieve that success.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules and regulations that you have to follow, but at the same time, if you kind of flip the script on a positive element, how do you create this culture that really allows people to thrive and companies to thrive?
Now I can go down a long rat hole on this one,
Yeah.
so stop me.
It's exciting stuff.
So I like to, culture is an area where I have a lot of passion.
Yep.
In my mind, you start with purpose. Why do we exist? Why does my business exist? What are we trying to accomplish? What good are we doing for society? Once you've got purpose figured out, then you can get to core values and mission. All that's all wonderful stuff, but let's bring it down to the day-to-day with an employee. If there's one thing I can share with the audience that I would encourage managers, leaders of local businesses to do is spend time talking to your people.
At the end of the day, it's a people business.
It really is. And I think there's a secret weapon that most managers don't use, and I'd like to share it if you don't mind.
Of course, we'd love to hear.
One-on-one meetings.
What is this? One-on-one? You meet one-on-one with the manager?
Meet one-on-one with your manager, talk about work, talk about what's going on in your life, just talk.
Get to know each other.
Get to know each other.
Not usually in front of other people.
No, these are
more private,
individual, private conversations. And people say to me, well, how often should I do that? And I say, it depends. If you have an employee who knows their job, is dependable, a steady Eddie or a steady Eloise, then maybe you only need to meet with them one-on-one once a month.
Okay.
But if you have a new hire who's still learning the business or learning their job, you probably want to do that once a week until they've reached a level of maturity where you can adjust.
Yep.
But those one-on-one conversations are worth their weight in gold. If there's one thing you take away, take that away.
Have one-on-ones, yeah.
Yeah.
It can alleviate a lot of problems early on by just having the one-on-one with somebody.
Well, you will get to identify problems before they become big issues.
Exactly.
You get to know your people. You get to understand what motivates them and what demotivates them. And as leaders, as managers, guess what? The old days of hierarchical control, those are gone. And if they're not gone in some places, they're on their way out. COVID, well, lots of things have taught us that I believe the 21st century is a period of time where human leadership and focusing on the whole employee as opposed to, you're a cog in the wheel,
Yep.
is really critical to achieving organizational success.
Now you're starting to sound like Peter F. Drucker talking about some
Well,
of these great management principles.
Peter Drucker was right 50 years ago.
Yeah, he knew what was going
He
on.
knew what was going on.
Yeah,
He didn't use that language,
for sure.
but the concepts were there.
Yeah. I have a quick question though in regards to the one-on-ones. I've heard from some managers that they really champion the whole idea of 3 people in a meeting. So kind of one maybe supervisor with 2 together along those lines. What would you say as an advantage of, would you prefer kind of the one-on-one? You think that's the best method, or the different situations call for different?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's situational.
Okay.
If it's to talk about how am I doing, I want that to be a private conversation with my boss. I may choose to share that with a colleague, but that's my choice. I don't want my boss forcing that sharing on me.
Yeah, with another person there. They might hear different things. And one thing too, in terms of productivity, kind of creating this positive culture, how important is that relationship with the supervisor and the happiness at the job?
I think it's everything.
Everything.
I genuinely do. I don't have it with me, but there's lots of statistics that indicate that people don't quit companies; they quit their bosses.
Quit their bosses.
And I will tell you, I've done it. I've quit a boss twice, actually.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because in my situation, they were both superb companies.
Yeah.
But I don't want to use a foul word, but I mean, the people I worked for in that time were jerks. So,
Yeah.
and we all have jerks in our careers.
Yeah. And life is short. I mean, if you have the opportunity to transition to someplace else, maybe a better supervisor, better culture, it can have a huge impact on your happiness at work, your health, your productivity. All these things can make a huge difference.
How you feel about your work, how you feel about your job is a profound influencer on your overall health. It's way more important than people realize.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to talk about Sigmund Freud, he always said is relationships and work. Those are kind of the 2 things. So if you're missing one, he always said you were in a crisis. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not a student of Freud, but that sounds right to me. So, but no, I think companies, no matter how big or small, will be successful if they can create a culture where people can bring themselves to work, don't have to wear a mask all day because that's exhausting,
yeah.
and where people can feel as though I can connect with what this business is all about. It means something to me. And Generation Z, which we haven't talked about, but there's a lot of buzz about Gen Z.
Okay.
I read an article just the other day. Gen Z is now characterized as job shoppers, not job hoppers.
Okay.
And the reason why they're being characterized that way is Gen Z folks want to work for a company with which they can identify. They don't want to work for jerks.
Yep. Simple as that.
It really, and I know I'm grossly oversimplifying,
Yep.
and apologies to all you Gen Zers out there,
Yeah.
but you care about what the business is about. You want to have a balance in your life, and you want autonomy, and you want to be able to use your technology skills. You don't want to have to, put tops on bottoms all day.
Yeah. I mean, tops on bottoms all day. It kind of makes me think, we were talking a little bit before about the job market and people applying to countless jobs, but then from the other side, these companies are receiving tens, hundreds, thousands of resumes. Do you have any high-level thoughts or solutions for this?
I don't know that this is a magic answer. I don't think there is a magic answer. But job seekers learn the principles of search engine optimization. And by that I mean the keywords. So if you're interested in a job with XYZ company, read that job description. Try to understand what are the key phrases or important words in the job description.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that you can say so truthfully, make sure your resume, your cover letter has those key words. Because your document that you submit, well, electronically,
Yep.
is in probably 90% of the cases being read by a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And that machine is trained to look for those key phrases or words.
Okay.
So be smart. Learn the principles of search engine optimization
Mm-hmm.
and apply it to job hunting.
Okay. And then what about from the company perspective? They receive tens, hundreds, thousands of resumes. How do you sift through all those resumes?
Well, that's why they're using technology.
Okay.
That's exactly why. I happen to be a big fan of a tool that basically what happens is you feed the job description to this tool.
Okay.
The tool will pump out questions to use in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
But what you also do is you implement a behavioral assessment
Mm-hmm.
to the candidate. The tool will then take that behavioral assessment, look at the job description, and rank the candidates in terms of best fit,
Okay.
so that if I have 500 applications for a job, but I can identify the top 5 from a fit point of view,
Mm-hmm.
it's a much better use of my time.
Mm.
So
Just go through those.
firms are using more and more technology to help them be more efficient in the hiring process.
Okay. And we're running out of time here, so we probably just have time for another minute or so. I'm curious that with your amazing knowledge and wisdom in human resources, is there kind of one thought that you'd like to leave with the viewers today to either know more about you or something that you want to share some wisdom with the community?
I'm not going to talk about me.
Yeah.
I've talked about me enough. But I'm happy if people want to reach out. Certainly happy to connect with folks. But I would say when you're applying for a job
Mm-hmm.
or when you're in a job, the thing to remember, and this is going to sound a little cold,
Mm-hmm.
but I like to live in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
You're always selling yourself.
Mm.
You're always marketing yourself, whether it's a presentation, your job performance, meeting someone with whom you may have romantic interest.
Mm-hmm.
You're always selling yourself. And if you remember that you are always selling yourself, I think you'll be a happier person.
That's great. I appreciate that. And I feel like there's still a lot more that we didn't get to cover today, but I'm so grateful for you taking the time to share some wisdom with the community and with our viewers. So thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.